All right, all right. Welcome to Let's Talk Real Estate and Stuff. Can Carlos hear us?
Thank you for having us. I can hear you.
Excellent.
I didn't get to ask in the pre-show yet if there's any baby Pedersen, an additional baby Pedersen out there in the world yet.
Friday.
Friday.
That's why we're recording on it. We got a schedule. I scheduled it like everything in my life. I said, put that
You time
freaking
blocks.
baby in my count. Yeah, I told the doctor, I said, can you send me a Google invite? Otherwise, I can't make it. I need to make sure I keep a slot available for this.
Love that.
Oh man. Hopefully the baby decides to wait till Friday. I guess that's always an option that could happen.
Bro, listen. When this is your fourth kid, it's like I'm just cruising there. I'm good to go. I'm hanging out. I'm not doing anything. My wife does all the work. I'm just going to hang out. Beauty is Lakeland has a pretty good cafeteria. So
Just be hanging out in the cafeteria, eating, waiting to say hi.
I'll go down, get a shake.
Do you guys know what you're having?
An omelet. Having another girl. Apparently, I only make girls.
You got one son. Come on now.
3 girls, 1 son.
Yeah, 3 girls, 1 son. The odds, John, don't play into the favor of the boys in my family.
Oh, really? Like historically, that's a thing?
Yeah, I grew up in a house of women. It was me and my 2 sisters. My dad was always traveling as a salesman, so it was just me and a house of women. Same thing here. Just, again, overrun by girls. Me and my son are always talking about how we need a boy. I'm like, bro, like I'm trying. I don't know what else I can do.
The genetics are not playing in your favor, buddy. I'm sorry.
I know. Trust me, we did a lot of research.
Yeah.
Trying to figure out how to have a boy.
Wait, there's like things you can do to like. I know, like in animals, that's a thing. Like if the certain, like sea turtles, the certain temperature of the sand makes boys or girls.
Foods. There's certain. What the fuck, John?
Sorry, we're in your turtle.
Leave it to you to try to. I know. Find a way to relate even pregnancy back to turtles.
Vegas had us at the over under of 8 minutes before John brought up turtles. So those who those who took the under on John mentioning turtles for 8 minutes won some money. But
fucking out.
That's hilarious.
There's certain.
I didn't know that though. I didn't know that you could do certain things.
Well, apparently they don't work.
We tried and it failed.
But anyway, so that's why we're recording early.
Well, we hope all goes well.
Yeah,
and you get to meet your little baby girl there soon.
And also, you're not doing anything. You're not doing anything physically.
Babies.
Well, you did do something physically to get the baby there, obviously, but
you're not doing that too.
You're not doing anything physically at the hospital during the delivery, but like a true leader of the family and legacy, you're doing a lot to lead the family and mentally and keeping everybody even keel and calm and happy. So.
Yeah, I'll be delivering Mountain Valley waters to my wife in the hospital. That was her one concern this morning. She's like, "How am I going to drink good water at the hospital?"
There you go.
I'm like,
That's
don't worry, I'm smuggling them in.
Yeah.
Speaking of good water, finally watched that episode last night with Zac Efron and the whole family.
Yeah,
it was pretty cool. I like what they're doing over in Paris. That was pretty unique. I went to Paris 2005. Don't remember that. I don't think they had it then.
I don't know. But I was talking to a guy, so I'm trying to buy these 2 mobile home parks in Hot Springs, Arkansas. Mm-hmm. He was telling me Hot Springs is a very similar, obviously I didn't bring up the Zac Efron episode, but I was relating it to it. He said they have a very similar thing where from the springs, you go downtown, they have fountain water that basically you can go up and fill up your water bottles. And he says it comes directly from the springs. And I was like, no shit. Huh? Like I could just go down there and drink fresh, because Hot Springs is close to the Ouachita Mountains where the Mountain Valley water is made, and so that's how I was trying to get rapport building around the water. And then he told me that, and I was like, I don't know why more, especially Florida, with all the springs we have, why we don't have it. But
do you really want me to get into that? Because my wife works for the Florida Springs Institute. I could tell you some stories.
But it's not bad, but Hot Springs has some nice stuff. Still trying to buy those mobile home parks. So
I like it that you brought in water as your rapport builder conversation piece.
Yeah, I like that.
Well, as I've always told you, why I'm dialing and waiting for the dialer to connect, because when I dial parks, I'm on a single line. I'm over here looking at like lake houses. I'm Googling top 5 lakes in Arkansas. So I went deep on Arkansas So like I can talk with a lot of these older people. One of them went fishing. I was like, "What lake did you go to?" "Oh, Lake Hamilton." We started talking about it, and because a lot of these old timers, man, it's a lot different than single family houses when you're talking to somebody where it's like, "Give me an offer.
Yeah,
Let's get
yeah,
straight
yeah.
to." You know what I mean? Like, I've been 500 people have called me today.
Mm-hmm.
You're all just, give me $1 million. These old guys, like, they want to tell you stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Even my wife listening to me, she's like, "Your conversations are much different."
When you're trying to source mobile home parks from Arkansas.
They want to educate you. They want to teach you something. They're willing to share about how they develop the park, all that stuff. It's a whole different type of convo than like when I was, talking to somebody who owns just a house.
Yeah. So these two parks, are they listed for sale, or did you find them and you reached out?
Listen, bro, I don't want to jinx anything because you got to dial, you got to make a dozen offers, but it's 2.9 mil
Mm-hmm.
for what would be it's two parks, 2.9 for a total of about 100 units.
Wow.
Grossing about 50K a month currently.
In
But
revenue or in profit?
in revenue.
Okay.
So grossing about 50K in revenue, but he's got probably another 20 some spaces that need to be filled, and he's severely under rent, as most of these people are.
Under rent what he's charging, or the occupancy is
Yeah.
lower than.
Well, the occupancy is low. Like in this one park, he's got like 15 units that are empty. So it's a 62. That one's a 62, and he's got like 15 or so that are just vacant lots that you got to pull units into.
Oh,
and rent
okay.
out.
Not
And it's 100
trailers.
units total, so 29K
No.
a unit, you said?
So it's like 62 and 35 or 37. So I don't think it's 100 on the dot, but I just rounded. Anyway, problem is some fucking assholes from California offered him $1 million down because they run a REIT, and I gotta call it. I meant to call him yesterday. This was Friday. I was following up with him because he had gotten back from the auto auction. He went to Mecum or whatever, Barrett Jackson, one of those things. He just likes to buy cars.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's rich old people, bro. He's like, "I'm flying my plane out. My buddy's got a car he's trying to sell. I got to see if there's any toys I can buy." And so, like, I didn't talk to him for a week.
Yeah.
Because this is multiple phone calls. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's a great deal, but I can't beat $1 million. I can't. I just told him that. I was like, "Man, it's just me and my wife. Like, I can't come up with $1 million. It doesn't even make sense." I ran it through my calculator. I don't even fucking understand how it makes 0 sense. Yeah,
Doesn't matter.
cash on cash, it makes no sense.
Mm-hmm.
And he goes, "Well," he goes, "if all works out, they'll probably just run it into the ground, and I'll be taking it back over in a few years anyway." And he goes, "That's how I got this park. Is back in the day, early 2000s, the guy who owned it sold it to somebody from out of state, ran it into the ground. Mortgage came due, foreclosed. He picked it up at the auction.
Oh,
Penny, bro, he bought these parks. I don't even know. I forget because I've looked at so many, but I'm pretty sure this is the one where he paid like a couple $100,000
holy crap
for these two parks, and he's gonna make like a fuck ton of money."
Interesting. Well, hey, maybe he'll sell to you just because you're not a giant corporation.
Here's the thing: is I have a couple of tricks up my sleeve, like true creative, trying to offer him stuff of how I could do it. But he's talking about selling one of them for 1.9 versus the other one, the smaller one, for an extra mil. But anyway, there's a huge value add play. Like when you look at it, you have a 2.9 on 100 units pulling in 50K, and I estimate based on the units, I could probably get that back up to about 75K if I fully occupy it and like maximize the rent. So I can add quite a bit of revenue, maybe even a little bit more. But this problem is, one thing you guys got to keep in mind with like mobile homes, and I'm going off on a tangent, sorry, but a lot of them are really small. So like he has, and people don't realize that. So when you're trying to sell somebody mobile homes, one of the things I want to know is the age of the mobiles and the size of the mobiles, because that tells me how much I can max my rent out for. Like a 900 to 11, 12, those are like perfect sizes because I can really stretch my rents. You get too big, yeah, I don't want a 1,800 square foot mobile. Like that's not.
It's like the size of like a Miami neighborhood house here, like a single family.
Yeah, and what am I gonna do? It's a trailer park. What am I charging you $2,000 a month? You know what I mean? Like, but if I have a 700 square foot or a 900, I could reasonably charge either $859 or $1,000 on the 900 square foot one and still fall into a lot of people's price range on a 3-2.
Yeah.
But he has a bunch of 400 square footers.
What? I didn't
Yeah.
even realize they
Like
made them that small.
Yeah.
How old are those
So-
things?
I don't, off the top of my head, I don't know that off the top of my head. But one of the things he told me he does, this is where it gets interesting. So he likes to educate. He goes to the government seizure auctions and buys trailers and fills them in. So I went and again, he didn't tell me this. I pieced this together.
Mhm.
So I'm looking at the units, the size of them, 482 square feet, like the length and width and all that. And then he tells me he gets his units from the auto auction or the government seized auction, GSAauctions.com, if anybody wants to know. And he goes, go to the trailer section and you could pick up trailers. Well, FEMA trailers from like yeah, guess how big they are? They're about 480 some square feet. They're just a little single wide that they roll into these areas, and then when they're done with them,
They sell them off.
And apparently this motherfucker has picked a bunch of them up, so like he's got a whole shit ton of them.
That's really interesting.
So it's like, I know, so I started piecing it together. So like my conversations with this guy, he's got 432, like a 324 square foot one. There's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So he's got about 9 of them in the one park that's underneath 500 square feet.
Huh. What kind of bed baths are they?
So I don't have that. Like,
okay.
Not every county is very detailed, especially for mobile homes. They don't really tell you bed bath. But I would say they're 2 bed. I mean, those ones are probably 1 bedroom.
Yeah.
I would imagine they're 1-1s. But the other ones, like the smaller he's got a couple 672s, which I have like one of those in my park. Those are going to be like 2-2s.
Interesting. So when you're like the trailer, is it just short? Like it's because they usually a standard width. It's just they're shorter trailers.
Yeah, I mean they're pretty much anywhere from. I mean, I've seen them at 8, but you're probably going to be at somewhere from 14 to 16 feet wide, maybe 18, but 14 to 16 feet wide is kind of typical.
Okay.
Like I got a lot of 16 by 72s, but you could have them go from 60, 50, 70. I mean, feet long.
Interesting.
And then the double wides, but when you have a double wide, it's twice as much to get it delivered and dropped
Right.
off. But
Very interesting.
very interesting. So I'm very intrigued by this guy's park, but I think I could beat the Reed out if I could just get him to listen to some of my stuff, because the $1 million that they're giving isn't going to solve his tax problem.
Right.
So he was supposed to go and talk to his CPA to whether or not my seller finance offer was going to help his tax problem. I know it will, but I'm not an accountant. So he's got to talk to his accountant to make sure that he doesn't have to pay taxes on the unreceived portion up front.
Right.
In between that time, the REIT slipped in.
The what?
The REIT, the California investor.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And made him an offer. And currently they're negotiating that, but I'm trying to beat him out.
So back to my original questions: did he list these for sale, or did you just source them?
Sourced them, bro.
Nice.
Got my fucking list right here. This is my Alabama list. I'm moving into Alabama today, but
Roll Tide.
I don't know shit about Alabama, but
While you're
when I'm
dialing,
I'm going to be learning all about Alabama.
You're a college football guy. Anytime I'm on a sales call with someone in Alabama, you have to find out if they're Roll Tide, like a University of Alabama fan, or if they're War Eagle, Auburn.
Say this again.
So you need to find out if they're Roll Tide or War Eagle. Have that in your follow-up notes.
Well, hang on. Is it War?
War.
As in like WAR?
Yeah.
That's Auburn.
Yeah.
Auburn is War Eagle.
Auburn, yeah. So that's massive. That's a massive rivalry in Alabama football.
What's Roll Tide?
Alabama Crimson Tide.
Alabama.
I don't
look up-
watch football,
See,
and I
listen,
know Roll
If
Tide.
you guys,
Come on
if
now.
you guys look up, there's good commercials like Roll Tide, like ESPN commercials. It's kind of like an expression that you say to themselves. So you could work that in for some good report. for
Oh,
sure.
100%. But do you see what we're talking about here? Not like going off topic, but like I have told my call center staff and like my salespeople, it's so ingrained in me that while I'm doing it, I need to, and I think, and I want to be clear for any salespeople listening, I think the type of rapport we're talking about is fake rapport.
Right.
Like it's not, when you talk about real rapport, talking about football and the weather and all that, that's not going to get you the deal. But it is going to help start to ease some stuff into where you can get them to be more empathetic and start to really build real rapport where you come into a human understanding. But, it's just learning while I'm dialing and Googling these things is something that not just because I'm buying mobile home parks, but it's something that everybody, I feel like it's just, if you're a cold caller, your cold call team should be doing it. If they're from the Philippines or Belize or wherever they're from, they should be Googling where they're dialing and understanding the location.
Yeah, I think it's just a basic level. It's just such a easy, it's like a light switch size lever to hit. Why would you not say something like that? And it's not going to close the deal if you say, "Hey, roll tide," or like when you end a conversation, you say "roll tide." That's not going to be like, "Oh, you know what? I should sell this guy the park, even though he's only offering $10K down instead of $1 million." But it's at least at a subconscious level, showing like, "Hey, this person cares enough in the conversation.
He's real. He's real,
and he at least cares to like." Yeah. He's not like, all right, 123 Main Street. This is what I can offer.
So transactional.
Yeah, you're not as transactional. Like, dude, like, people are humans. People want to live life and have fun, and it's like, don't take life too seriously, man. Close some deals, have some fun.
There's plenty of time, unless you're on like, I mean, even my callers, there's still downtime between, especially as the list gets older. You're still gonna have some downtime in between. There's plenty of time to be Googling when you're on a dialer, unless your boss is just like fucking has a huge abandon rate and like is just fucking plowing you with just calls. Mm-hmm. But that's not like, so anyway, but I got to get a hold of this guy. So I use Investor. So I transfer it from my smartphone, right? And then, so I load my Excel sheet into smartphone. I'm doing it all manual. There's like no true automation. I have not asked for any linkages or anything that was already built in my system that InvestorFuse set up. So like, I just push it over. It says smartphone has it. It says push to CRM. Mm-hmm. It pushes to my InvestorFuse because I had that hooked up when I signed up. And then it goes into the Smart Dialer campaign, which is like a default campaign because I'm only doing one at a time. So then I go grab it, throwing it in my mobile home park group, and campaign. And then I just push all my notes in there. Yep. And then I just put it into a follow-up. And I don't follow up. There is no real follow-up because all of these are like, I am now a cold caller trying to get a hold of people. And then when I talk to them, like I have a couple that said when I'm out there, just drive by the park and meet them and talk to them. Mm-hmm. So like I have multiple that I'm not going to call to follow up. I'm just going to fly out there, call them. Be like, hey, I'm in town. Like I'm stopping by your park. I was going to drive through it. Are you there? Like, let's meet.
Yeah.
And so that's what I use InvestorFuse for at this point, is more of like holding the ones off of these Excel sheets that have at least wanted to talk to me and haven't straight up said no. I even put somebody in InvestorFuse who was like, hey, we're not selling, but just give me a call and I'm happy to help you out, talk about, because she's close to my park.
Nice.
She's in the same town. And she's like, if you have any questions or anything or need help with people, like just let me know.
Oh, that's cool.
And so I pushed her in too and made a little tag up there.
So building the mobile home network in Arkansas.
Yeah,
we'll get a push to, or I guess workflow trigger anytime Brandon Marks puts a label for like a mobile in Arkansas. It automatically ships them a Mountain Valley glass of water. I have a couple points to ask you guys here. All related to what we talked through so far. So Brandon has been in a mastermind with Chris Ruud before, pretty popular real estate coach, real estate investor, wholesaler, does everything. He's been posting at least 3 times I've seen, either in communicating.
Oh, I know what you're going to say.
Well, it's because you were talking about how this guy was talking about how the deal could potentially fall apart, not necessarily for tenants trashing it, but Chris Ruud has been a little bit vocal talking about the negative aspects or sub 2, or I guess mainly new
100%.
Students getting into deals that don't have much equity and they're just getting on because they have good debt on them. So single family stuff. So I was curious your guys' opinion on that. Obviously we love pace. I think subject to is great, but I'm curious what leads Chris to like posting that and just in general your thoughts.
Because
Brandon's the only one that knows him.
It's the fucking truth. What he says is the truth. Pace is pace. There are, and Alex Casada and all of them, they have money. taking over a subject to in a perfect situation is a phenomenal way to help a seller. It is a phenomenal tool if done correctly. But what bothers me is to tell a newbie investor who has no money to get into a sub 2 and one thing goes wrong. Bro, we've had in every rental I've had, something has gone wrong. So I'm cash flowing at $200, $300, $400 a month, but my AC breaks and it's $5,000. How are you paying for that?
Mhm.
So in a perfect scenario, it works. What's up?
I'm confused. So I'm sure somebody listening is confused.
Okay.
Let's explain sub 2. Like go a little macro first. I'm getting it.
Whiteboard.
So subject 2 is essentially where you're taking over somebody's mortgage. So if I want to get out of my house and I can't sell it because maybe I've lost of equity, or just in general, I just want out and I'm like, yo, just give me like $5,000 and you can have my house and the mortgage. I called somebody the other day who did sub 2 back in 2010. He didn't even fucking know. It was wild. He thought he had sold it.
So do they stay in the house or they're gone?
So what happens is I take over your mortgage payments, and let's just make this up, and I'm just making all of this up. And I take over your $2,000 a month mortgage payment, and maybe I give you $5,000, $10,000, whatever it is you ask for your exit fee, right, just to leave. Maybe I reinstate some back owed payments, whatever that is. You leave. Now, the proper way to do it is to probably use a servicing company, like a middleman, to make your payments. Some people do, some people don't.
What's the benefit of that versus paying it yourself?
So a service using a service company separates the payments, and it allows the seller to show that they could probably go get another mortgage at that point. And show that it's kind of like, anyway. So you can set up a servicing company, and it's very professional. You pay them, they pay the client. Whatever, but
hold on. So it's not like you're actually taking over the mortgage.
No, you're taking over.
Okay, so you take over your LLC, whatever. You, the person, go to the mortgage of the original of the house and say, "Hey, I am now in charge of this. Put my name on it."
Hey, take over. You just take over the mortgage stays in the other person's name. So you just take over the mortgage and you pay the payments on their behalf.
Okay,
and
so
it's not actually, like who actually owns the property would go to the investor's name who's taking over.
Yeah. So if I'm selling John my house, John takes over the deed, but the mortgage stays in Brandon's name. Anyway, that's all well and good. But the problem is, John, is if I have a $2,000 mortgage that you're taking over and you're like, cool, I can rent this out for $2,500. And the benefit is I don't need to run my credit. Right. I don't need to do any of this. I don't need a down payment. Right. Typically, a lot of these guys are like, just take my house.
Yeah.
So the pitch is you could get into homes with low cash. Mm-hmm. So, and that's true. And if something goes wrong, it's like any other rental. Problem is it's my problem with it, I guess, is the demographic that it's targeting of getting into a home. It's that whole pitch. Invest with no money. Mm-hmm. So it's a way for newbie investors to try to build their portfolio with no money. And so somebody like Pace, if something goes wrong, he can afford it. Like he's got assets and it diversifies over all of your portfolio, right? Me, if one of my units goes down and I got 30 some other ones, that's 100% okay. I can take the money from these ones and put it over here. But what Chris is saying is buying something with no equity. So again, let's say you're buying my house at $2,000. You don't care what you're paying for it because you're not paying like a full ARV price. Right. You're just taking over a payment. So whether my house is worth $300K or not is irrelevant to you in most cases. And that's what Chris is saying, because you're worrying about the payment to your rent.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I want to walk through a couple scenarios here. So going back to what you're saying, right? Like some newbie investor comes in, they don't have any money, the AC breaks, they're now a landlord in this place, and so they got a place for $5,000. What happens if they can't pay the mortgage?
So, I mean, there's legal repercussions. Listen, I'm not an expert on sub 2, okay? There's legal repercussions where, it would be on you, but I don't know what paperwork was signed either. So how was the proper paperwork done? And then remember, in order to actually go do something, it costs money to hire an attorney. So like these people to come back to you would take some effort on their part, but essentially you can't default. You sign paperwork saying that you can't default. That's the extent of my knowledge.
Yeah, and in a general
So I
sense,
would be- I'd be
that property
speaking out of
wouldn't be
turn.
yours. That property would somehow get taken away from you and given to somebody else, which is what made me think of it with the guy that you're negotiating his mobile.
So, and Chris is saying that it's a bad thing to teach people to say, go buy any house with sub 2, regardless of what it's worth. So if John takes over my 300K house, but maybe it's only worth 300
Mhm.
because I just bought it 2 years ago and I haven't paid anything down. I did it on a 3.5% FHA. So out of a 300K house, maybe it's like a 290 worth of equity in it, but prices have come down a little bit. So maybe like there's no equity. John can't sell it. He can't refi it. He can't do anything. You have no maneuvering in it. You didn't buy it at a discount. Like if I were to go buy a regular rental with a hard money or a down payment,
Yeah.
I would go and I would be putting down some money or buying it at 20 or 80% of its value,
Yeah.
right? So I'd have immediate equity into it.
Yeah.
So Chris is saying his whole speech over the last weekend
Mhm.
was like, this is like, don't fall for this trap. My thing is don't fall for the trap because you could get into some shit when the market collapses. Like, so when I was working with the foreclosures in the banks, you know how many people I ran into? A couple. That's how I learned about sub 2 is the horror stories of people getting foreclosed on when they thought they had sold their house to somebody, but that person stopped making the payment.
That's what I'm saying.
But
It
they
comes back to the original person.
But they were still collecting the rent.
Mm.
So like you go to the site, you got a tenant, the tenant's like, what are you talking about? I've been paying my rent. You're trying to track down the person who did the sub 2 supposedly on it. They're collecting the payments, not paying the mortgage. The person who thought they handled all this like 2 years ago with somebody find out that their mortgage hasn't been getting paid. This was also back in 2009 and 10. So listen, a lot has changed since then in transparency and technology. But so I've seen the horror stories, and I agree with Chris. I think it is a phenomenal thing when done correctly with somebody who has the experience and the financial capability to back the negative things that can happen. And it's also my belief in Airbnb. I'm not a huge fan of Airbnb because I think that when the market collapses, all these people who used Airbnbs as an exit strategy when nothing else worked, I think are going to be in trouble. Whereas the big Airbnb investors who have a lot of assets spread over multiple markets, I think they'll be okay because they probably also bought it right.
Yeah.
That's why I don't necessarily like, I understand what Chris is saying makes sense if it goes down that path, if something bad happens or anything. But I mean, I think no matter what your exit strategy is, if you're getting a bad deal, you're getting a bad deal. Like something and that's the thing. If you're a newbie investor, you're going to be more, you should be in theory more selective of the deals that you're willing to take on versus someone like Brandon that has a 36 unit mobile. And if he loses a tenant in one place, like, no,
that's wrong.
What's wrong?
Flip it.
You should be more selective than a newbie.
You don't give a shit. You just, no, not should, is.
Oh, that's what I'm saying.
I'm
should.
Replacing with is. Newbies
that's why I'm kind of
selective.
arguing. That's why I'm kind of like arguing. Well, that's why I'm kind of arguing Chris's point of like, that's the whole idea of if you have a really good community and coaching program, like hopefully other coaches in that program are giving you the knowledge of like, hey, as a newbie, you should be the most selective because if something goes wrong down the line, you don't want to get bitten.
Yeah, I get that.
But obviously, it's not a perfect world, and people want to make
that's not the case.
People want to make a quick buck, and a lot of people, like we've talked about on the show, like so many people get into this industry, they're like, man, I need to make a quick 10, 20 grand or whatever.
So it depends. It depends on what you're talking about too. So like, I haven't touched a dime from this mobile home park, and I never got any money from any of my rentals. It's like. It depends on how you're taught. So if that newbie who buys their sub 2 isn't looking at it as let me spend an extra $200 a month, right? Let me pay my own bills. And they're like, let me save. And they have a separate savings account, like a profit first style thing where they're setting aside that money and it's stacking up.
For CapEx, whatever.
And then for CapEx, and they have a CapEx reserve. Like we have a reserve. We do a 25% reserve in our park until it's stabilized, and then we'll go down to a 15. But like, and we stack that up, and that rolls. Even if we spend it, it just keeps staying at that same level. And then if I feel we're going to encounter more CapEx, I'll actually pull more down into that reserve, depending on what kind of turns we have going. But who's teaching the newbies that? But instead, so that's where I'm with Chris is. It would take a lot of mindset training on a lot of these different avenues. So you have the how to buy a property avenue, what to do with a rental money. And too many people are like the school of get a rental and it'll be how you live, right? Like that income becomes your income for your lifestyle. No, bro. Like first you need enough passive income to pay and maintain your rentals. Then you need the passive income to pay and maintain your employees. Then you need enough passive income to pay and maintain you. Then you get the passive income to pay and maintain your lifestyle. But I'm at the 4th or 5th
Then the
tier
jet.
at that point of what, yeah. And then the 6th tier is the fucking jet, bro. And I have a path for that, right? Like I know how many, based on what size units, like parks, I know I need to get up to like, I want 100 I want 100 parks.
Mhm.
And I feel like when I'm at that point, I've covered all my bases. And it's like, when you're buying one sub 2 at a time and you're getting an extra 200 or 300 bucks a month cash flow, save that up for a year. That is one AC.
Right.
Right.
And if that AC breaks, whole thing goes to shit.
Mhm.
Whole thing goes to shit. That tenant moves out,
Yeah.
or it takes you a while to occupy it.
Or they don't pay rent and you got to kick them out and they made a mess inside the house.
Bro, we have one that's been vacant for 2 months. We dropped the price on it. It's just it was the one I was telling you guys about, right? I'm not hurting because one, I account for a vacancy loss, and two, I have 30 some other units collecting rent at the same time in that same park, which is why I went up to multifamily, because I learned my lesson in single family stuff, because I hated when that happened on my single families. And it was just, I was getting a higher rent rate, but then when somebody would go down and I'm now 15 or 1800 bucks in rent that month, like it would hurt. And I also didn't have a huge portfolio, so I mean that also plays, the size of your portfolio also plays into it. Guys who crushing single family with like 200 doors is a lot different than me when I had a dozen doors.
Yeah. So like, what's Pace doing like wrong there? I mean, I'm
not gonna say Pace is doing anything.
I love Pace too, and I think he's great.
He is a highly intelligent person. It's his audience. A lot of his people are the desperate bunch looking for that deal of where they can get in and take over and build a portfolio. And if they do it right, I have no problems. And I know Pace teaches it right. Much of what I know is from watching his videos. I mean, a lot of what I explained to you is just from watching his videos.
People are taking his advice and doing the exact wrong, like taking his method and not taking his advice. He can't
control what they do with the money. He could teach them how to acquire the deal, but he can't force them to manage the deal properly. He can't force them to save that money up and not spend it on increasing their lifestyle expenditures. So, and it's like the old adage of like, you can give somebody advice of when to buy a stock, but you can't give them advice of when to sell. So just don't give them advice. Because I could tell you to buy a stock and it starts going up, but if I sell it and then you hold on to it when it goes down, you're still going to blame me. So that's why you just don't give advice to people. And that's the same thing, is like, you can help them do this. But the problem is if I teach you to do it on a regular rental and you decide to wantonly spend your money, the only person you hurt is you. But on a sub 2, there's another party there that's relying on you to hold up your end of the deal and to responsibly manage that asset. So that's what Chris is saying, is you're going to get into some shit. You're going to buy this property with no fucking equity. Shit's going to go down. You won't be able to refi out or sell it. And what's going to happen? You have a couple months of no income. What are you going to do? How are you making up that $1,100 or $2,000 a month payment? Most people, that's more than their own mortgage. How are they paying that?
Interesting. So did Chris like encounter some situations that made him go off on this ramble, or?
Probably. I mean, Chris just has been doing this for like 20 some years. Listen, the second I started hearing people talk about sub 2, I was wary, because I remembered my own personal experience of running in and having to sit at a kitchen table with the people whose mortgage was in their name and them crying about how they thought they had handled this and they couldn't believe they were getting foreclosed on. The person they had given the property to wasn't picking up the phone. And I was trying to explain to them, you can hire an attorney, but they don't have the money.
It really kind of sucks for that PTSD. Seller.
Oh yeah. I mean, you can take it. Sellers can get put in bad situations with wholesalers too, if they drag out a contract or.
I read some chats. I think it was last week. I can't even remember why, I was going into one of the teams. Maybe I was looking for some stuff to use for the AI testing, and I'm like, my heart was breaking. Like the seller was like desperate. She was working with a wholesaler. They backed out the day before closing and promised her like up until that point everything was fine. Everything was going to be great, and like she was just like, I don't know what to do anymore. I was just like, oh my god.
No, it's fucking garbage. It's also the demographic of people that we deal with, who we bring in.
Yeah.
True.
I
have a couple other quick
it,
points to bring up.
Yeah, go for it.
One, just thinking of Arkansas, had an encouraging sales call today with somebody that should be signing up out of Arkansas that heard of Investor Fuse at Henry Washington's mastermind. He's a big, like, bigger pockets guy now. He's like one of the main bigger pockets guys. He's like a rental guy. He's been on the former podcast before.
Right, because he has multiple presidents' names.
Yeah, Henry Washington. But he had a mastermind. Dylan Osmond was presenting Investor Fuse to the room in a very, very high.
I love
speaking
that.
Very, very highly of Investor Fuse. I was like, man, that's awesome to hear. So I want to give a shout out there, and then also this was a few things from a post I saw. Just general psychology is kind of interesting, and then also a call John and I were on yesterday.
I want to talk about that one too.
Talking about the importance. Well, I think I'm going to have a different opinion on it, but the importance of following up on offers, not only your own offers, but why it may be even more important to follow up when a seller tells you they have like an existing offer or listing and what you want to find out on that offer. In general, I didn't really think about that till I saw a post of a woman talking about the importance of that and just understanding like, oh, you have it under contract with somebody else. What's it under contract for? What's the contract price? When's it supposed to close? Checking in like a week before, a day before, and why those could end up turning into the hottest deals. Obviously something that logically makes sense, but not something I would have thought like, oh yeah, that makes a ton of sense. So kind of prioritizing, speaking a little bit about prioritizing, following up on your own offers, but then following up when other people have offers instead of just throwing those things away.
You should not dead it out.
Yeah, instead of deading it out, exactly.
So I had talked to somebody who's an Investor Fuse customer. I was helping them set up their Investor Fuse account with like their dead statuses, and he wanted to mark it as dead. I forget what we called it. It was like sold to another investor, whatever. Like that's what we'll say. And he wanted to resurface it like later on. And I said, no. I was like, that's not how we do it. You are trained in my company. If somebody says that, you ask them what day they're supposed to sell it, and you schedule a follow-up on that day, the day before, 2 days before, because they're going to know the day before whether they're closing or not, or at least the day after, right? Like, and you call back because we know that, let's just hypothetically say there's, at a best case scenario, 75% closure rate. 25% of the people that say that to you are falling through.
Yep.
There you go.
That was.
So if you believe in expired listings, right? People always go after the expired listings. This is the same thing, same concept. And so I didn't agree that he was trying to resurface them. I'm like, why would you let your acquisition agent let go of that opportunity? Because that's what it is. It's still an opportunity. It's not dead. They didn't say it has sold. And the other thing is I'll make people go and look it up in county records. Like if it's in a disclosure state, right? Like just go and look. If they said they sold it last week or a month ago, like go verify that.
Yeah, that was one of the things when we were moving Nick Perry's team over to IF3. Like one of the things they focus on so much because they get such a volume of leads that they, large people saying, yeah, I took another offer, and they use a push to automation, and they put all of those into its own group so they can just watch them all and be in one place and look at them all and make sure that they're being taken care of.
That's not a bad idea.
Yeah,
that's actually a smart idea. I like that idea. Yeah, 100%. I just feel like, why would you? That's just letting money go.
Exactly. And I mean, they realize that. I mean, and even them, right? Like they got a great dispo team. They don't sell every property. So if they can't do it, then other people can't.
Put things into perspective.
And 75% is a pretty high closure rate. A lot of people are down at 50. Newbies are probably even lower. And a lot of it, like I was talking to a lady yesterday. I bought her cousin's property. I'm at like 280. Somebody offered her I don't even understand how someone offered her 365.
So was it subject to? Was it a sub 2 offer?
No, she needs the cash. But I don't get it. I mean, ARVs maybe 450, 420, but like maybe you could argue 450 because of the pool and the extra bedroom. But like, I was like, I know I'd love to work with you too. Your cousin was easy to work with, but like, here's where I'm at. You know, I gotta take it. But how can I tell them to take an $80,000 less offer, right? So I went through my spiel of value and all this, but there's $80K of difference.
It's a lot of money.
And the only thing she knows about me is I perform. She doesn't know about the other people because, I've worked with her cousin and they haven't. So, and I'm just sitting there like, I ran the numbers, bro. I was trying to make it work. I'm like, how can I pay? And I couldn't. I ran my calculator like I just fucking couldn't. I don't know how they offered 365.
Because they're just looking for 5 to 10K.
Right. They'd be looking at negative 5 to 10K.
Maybe they're a flipper? I don't know. Maybe they're
Unless I think I was doing it where like possibly I'm opening my calculator up where it's like, what was it? Yeah, they would have to have no repair budget. If they had no repair budget and 80% of ARV with a 450 ARV, like the highest end, they could offer a 350K max.
Jeez.
So even then, so there's no repair budget. And I was reading a post the other day. Sorry, but I was scrolling through Facebook and the guy's like, I can't push my deals. And everyone's like, well, what's going on? Tell us. He's like, what are you offering ARV? I'm offering 80, sometimes between 70 and up to 80% of ARV. And everyone's like, okay. And he's like, but no one's buying it. And one guy asked, like, are you doing, I forget how he worded it, but are you doing 80% ARV minus repairs? And the guy wasn't. He wasn't because I guess when he heard of offering 70% of ARV, we all say that knowing repairs come out of it. But he took it in the literal sense. So he's literally offering, if it's like 400K, he's offering 320, and that's 80% ARV. And he's wondering why people aren't buying his deal.
Not including
contracts. Nobody's buying them though.
Not including the repairs or the money he wants to make on an assignment.
Yeah, no. And so everyone's writing out everyone went to town writing out the formula. ARV times 80% minus repairs minus what you want to make equals your offer. And it's like,
oh god,
like, man, this is the guy. This is probably the guy bidding against me all the time. Right. Making these wild fucking.
Well, and then you follow up on that offer, and you see that they wasn't able to sell.
And there you go. You follow up.
You say Roll Tide if it's an Alabama person. They appreciate the rapport building there. The effort to
same thing building. Same thing with the mobile home park, right? Like just because the California people offered him an insane price and insane down payment, it may not work out. Like he may not sign. Even if I just keep following up and talking to him every other day or so, trying to build my rapport, like I still have a shot. You don't give up just because they're talking to somebody, and you also don't get desperate.
Yeah.
Like I didn't get desperate.
Yeah. Don't suddenly go, I'll give him 20K more.
No. Instead, I pulled, and this is funny, you guys are gonna make fun of me, but I pulled like a Steve Trang, that all shucks attitude, right? And I'm not a fan of it, but like I was like, oh man, I bet there's nothing I could do to make up for that, huh? They gave you $1 million. There's probably not much I could do to compete with that, huh? And he was like, well, you never know. I mean, and I was like, and instead of just getting desperate, like, well, what do I got to do? Like, what if I came up with that? And then it turns into this bidding war, and I can't come up with that. So, like, my best bet is to try to get some empathy and try to work like a man-to-man type of deal instead of him selling to a big company out of California. And I'm probably going to go into the Trump thing pretty soon as my next pitch because he's from Arkansas, and I know he probably loves Trump because he's a rich old man who built himself up from nothing. He has a plane and a bunch of classic cars. He likes to do dangerous stuff. I'm sure he is a very conservative type of person, not a liberal.
Yeah.
And he's
got like a 70% chance probably.
I have a 70% hit rate on being right on that, I feel. And so I feel like I can attack California.
Oh yeah.
And see if this guy and be like, do you really
a bunch of liberals
what you built from the ground? Yeah.
Yeah.
Californian?
They're
them coming in Arkansas,
they're probably
bro?
they're in California, but they're probably going to sell it to a Chinese real estate investor. Is that what you want to do to your party?
You know they probably voted for Biden, right? Is that what you want?
Oh god, that's pretty funny. That would be a good card to pull.
Yeah, I can't put $1 million down.
I pulled it on
I can't put $1 million down, but it reminds me of reading this book about a New York investor who was able to borrow some money, and he was able to put a large skyscraper on an option contract. And well, I don't want to bore you. He ended up being president in TV show, but you probably wouldn't want to hear about that story. But
I'm telling you, like, it's just a tactic, and it's not like it's my go-to, but it's just you connect with people on certain things, and I'm also connecting with them based on who I am.
Yeah, definitely.
Like, I'm not calling as a bigwig. I call and I'm like, it's me and my wife. Like, we're trying to buy another park. This is what we want to do with our life. And the difference, I think, between me and other wholesalers is I'm not wholesaling it. So, like, I can actually, I'm really talking to them and not just going through the numbers. Like, I got a deal from a wholesaler. So $3.5 million, 82 units, 48% of them vacant.
How is it that high?
So listen to this. It's grossing right now $25,000 a month, and he wants 3.5 mil.
What the fuck?
I'm over here negotiating a 100 unit at 2.9, and it's grossing 50K plus a month. And it's like, and then you look at the units, and I went through the units, and they're all like 1970s, 60 builds, 71s, 80s, and this other park, you know what I mean? Like, granted, there's some small ones, but they're 80s, 90s, 2000s, like, they're newer. And it's just a different, because they're focusing on cap rate, return, percent. Cool, I can offer you that. Not like actually diving in the operations of what it's going to cost, and then saying, this doesn't make sense for a mobile home park. It's not an apartment complex. That's a 4 cap, by the way, if anyone's asking. That's a 4 cap on a park owned, and there's a difference between park owned and tenant owned. That's a 4 cap on a majority park owned park.
Interesting.
With 48% vacant lots that you got to fill up. So your CapEx is going to be fucking crazy.
Yeah. Interesting. Well, hey, I have to go here soon because I got a meeting I gotta get ready for. But I want to jump back in convo to Carlos was talking about. Him and I were on a sales call yesterday. He brought in the big guns.
John Whitfield put on his John.
Really, I didn't get a call.
That's true. That's actually
that is true. Dude, if you want to tag team some sales, I'll line them up for you.
I'm down. I told you that before.
The Arkansas guy I mentioned today, I told him to sign up for not Arkansas call. RI Op Center call, because he's managing prospects out of Monday.com, essentially.
Oh, fuck.
Ouch. Yeah. Anyway, so this guy yesterday, he's coming from Resimply, and he had like an interesting process. And so Resimply has a Kanban style board, and you get to make the Kanban columns to be whatever you want them to be. And so he's got like uncontacted, I can't remember the next one, and then like offer made, right? And so he's like, here's what we do. We log in, we go to the offer. I filter by my acquisitions employee. We go to the offer made column, and one by one, we go through every single one to make sure that they're being followed up with. And so he's like, I want to reproduce this in Investor Fuse, and I want to use the groups. And so he's like, he's been in a trial, and he's like tried the groups, and I was like, listen, I don't recommend that. What you're doing is you're putting your management style, what you want to be able to overview, into the group structure versus relating it to how the employees use the system and what they need to be doing, and it needs to be simple. And it's like, inside of Resimply, when you're looking to review those 75 things, it takes you like an hour to get through all of them in that conversation. Like, if you put this into Investor Fuse, people use the action-based system, you can get that same information in like 3 minutes. You go and look at their actions, make sure nothing's overdue. You go and look at their employee scorecard to make sure they're hitting their KPIs, and you can immediately know if you need to have a conversation. If you really want to, you go to the opportunities, create a filter those that are on offer follow-up, scroll down the list, and you can see when that last touch was on every single one of those. In like 45 seconds, you get to the bottom of the list. You can even filter by the last touch.
Yeah, moral of the story, like, you need to work to the software system, not have the software system work to your old ways. Like, you work to the software system that you have. That's what you're paying it for. That's why you're doing it. So have your team work inside the new software, not try to get the software to work to your old team.
Yeah, and it was interesting. I haven't had a conversation like that in a while. I'm sure Carlos has them more than I do, but it was intriguing. I haven't had that conversation where it's like a manager is forcing a process onto people to make it easy for them to understand where they're at versus what is easy for your acquisitions people to get the deal done, to communicate with sellers and move all of their leads forward. And like just make it simple for them, and then use the like what we have, the tools and the reporting, that it makes it easy for you.
Well, I think a lot of it comes down to scalability. What you do when you're a solopreneur, people try to then use that same process of what they did on their own, and they hire a team and they try to keep it the exact same. But you got to understand what you did as a solo doesn't transcend to or scale to when you have 3 acquisition reps inside of a software. You have to do it a completely new process to handle that.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
And a couple things I learned about ReSimpli from that guy's process is kind of the epiphany I had during the call, and said it during the call yesterday, is that setup, it's probably beneficial for understanding like, oh crap, my team is behind on a lot of stuff, or unorganized, or we're not touching enough leads. It's almost like a good like fall safe tool where Investor Fuse gives you the better chance of being successful and being proactive and all that stuff.
I hate Kanban. It's a fucking clusterfuck.
That, and then also another good positioning play for us is the ReSimpli baked in phone isn't very good on the road. Like the mobile isn't good, like the connection.
No, of course not, because they're trying to be an all-in-one.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, Kanban, listen, I take it back. I like Kanban when you're dealing with like a small amount of things, but when you have Kanban and the one fucking Kanban column is like 100 things long,
like how is this useful?
How is that fucking useful to anybody?
Exactly what I
we
said,
had
bro.
so I haven't used it in a while, but my old realtor software was Kanban style. And again, it was cool initially as I'm loading my first customers in. And then like after a while, especially when I started using it for wholesaling, because that was the first one I tried.
It does not work
for my wholesaling. It didn't work for volume.
No.
Yeah, and then I switched to Podio back in the day. That was like 2017. 18.
Which Podio has a Kanban view, and I explained to him my opinions on Kanban. And
does it?
Yeah, you can switch it to badge layout.
Oh, I was gonna say card. It's badge, yeah.
Or maybe it's card. I don't know. It's been a while.
Still not Kanban.
But yeah, people have always asked me for it, and I'm like, I don't see the use case in a volume lead management scenario for real estate. I could maybe take the argument, like especially if I open up Investor Fuse and I enable you to make your own actions and your own action decision trees, I could see a use case for like bringing in Kanban there, because like if you're doing like what you're doing, right, like sourcing parks, that's less volume. And, you know, a macro kind of look might really help you stay organized there. But for wholesaling, when you like...
Right, when you're pushing that many leads...
it's not useful at all.
It's not going to be useful. Again, people just need... You pay this money for software. I think there's different levels to it. I think you get something like Podio initially where you really try to, you get someone's system, you go for it, and then you upgrade to like a software. And when you start to want things a certain way for you, that's when you either have to decide, okay, listen, I'm going to take a step back and work to the software that I have, or I'm going to go hire a developer and I'm going to get into like a Salesforce or go back to a Podio and then just pay a shit ton of money to have someone customize and be prepared to spend $50,000, $100,000 in developer costs every fucking year as you're tweaking and turning and doing stuff. And when you hit a certain level, I think like we talked to Eric Brewer, who does that. He spends $100,000 on his customized CRM in Salesforce, and he has a developer on staff that helps him adjust it. And I think once you know what you want and you're making that money, that is the final that's the final destination, right? But otherwise you work to the software that you have, and you need to develop your processes around that software.
Preach. The producer said some good content clips there this last 10 minutes talking software. Good stuff. I'm also thinking of the scene from Dumb and Dumber, if you guys are familiar. You guys familiar with that movie?
Yeah,
been a while.
I'm a limo driver.
Where Jim Carrey pulls out the IOUs, he spends all the money. And he's like Lambo.
It's a briefcase filled with them.
He's like Lambo, 250,000. Might want to hold on to that one. I want to make a meme for that of like Salesforce. Like, oh, you spent that much money on Salesforce, come over to Investor Fuse. So
that's pretty
maybe
funny.
For a future marketing. Shout out to Vince at Call Porter, man. Their commercial
Call Porter's fucking commercial that I sent
so
you.
good.
was I am there's a level of jealousy and envy that I have at him, but it's in a good way.
Yeah.
So there's two different types of jealousy and envy. There's the bad kind, but then there's the kind where you're like, this motherfucker, I want to do shit like that one day. Like that is I watched that commercial where he's like the military
good.
guy trying to make a call, and I was like, the production, the idea, like it was so creative.
I gotta go
Yeah,
watch
we got to
that.
get him back on
I
the
gotta
show.
watch that.
Yeah,
So good.
it was phenomenal.
Phenomenal. They're
Phenomenal.
a wide spread of commercials. We could put together some good commercials if that was in our
I feel like we,
wheelhouse. We definitely
I
could.
feel like we could.
Yeah.
I feel like we could.
All right, guys, I gotta run.
All right.
Have a great week.
Peace out, guys. See you next
Have a
time.
great
I'll
week.
be
Happy new family member.
Yeah. New Pedersen in the house.
locking
Yeah.
low, bro. Pumping them out.
See you guys.